1971. So it'll be 50 years ago next year in May. Came there, and I'm going to actually try to dip into some of your questions as I'm introducing myself. I came from working in New York for the summer, came home to the farm, then took a bus to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Was in my dorm room. My roommate had been in and out for the week that I had been there. Her parents came by to visit her, and she wasn't there. And they realized that she had a roommate that didn't look like her. So they decided that I was going to have to move. And at that time, the resident assistant, who was a Black lady, she said, no, she's not going anywhere. And that she had to stay in the room with me until whatever time period it was. So that was my first introduction to the dorm life. So I ended up with a private room for at least part of the semester. Again, when I went to pick up my registration cards for engineering classes, and associate dean in the engineering office said, oh, we get a lot of them, but they don't stay. So he actually was the very main reason that I was able to stay in that school, because I just wanted to make him out of the line. And so on my graduation day, I waved at him. Coming into the Black Americans for Democracy, I actually won the presidency as a running candidate against a young man from Fort Smith, Arkansas, H.L. McGill. And the reason was I was the first female to be president of the organization, because sometimes females get to be treated as if they don't know what they're doing or they're talking about. So, but I enjoyed my tenure as president. I was actually the one who was able to get the associate as ASG to provide financing for work study students. So we didn't have to depend totally on volunteers to get out the paper and things like that. We had 2 work study students, I believe, who worked there during that time period. But I spent 6 years on campus. My sophomore year, I had some medical issues and had to go to work full time because there was no health care to pay for the bills that I had. And, but during that time period, and I only lived in the dorm 2 years. My brother came to school after that, and he and I got an apartment. So I'll wait for whatever questions you all have toward the end. But, and I didn't return to the university until 1998, I believe, because quite frankly, I did not particularly care for the environment there.
Well, before we get to the other question, what made you come back in '98?
1998 was it was the 50 years of Blacks being on campus. And I think it was Nola, what's her name? Nola Rosta? Nola Rosta had invited me because Jennifer, they were going to have a Jennifer Hopkins Day, and Jennifer was one of my very best friends.
Yeah, well, I wanted you to ask a question, but because we also had Black Alumni Reunion.
Yes.
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 Come on, yeah, help me out.
It was. That was the reason. It was in conjunction with Jennifer Hopkins Day. Was in conjunction, right, with the 50th anniversary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
You did a good job.
Okay. Duffy's on?
Yes, he should be good to go.
Dr. Duffy?
Okay. Let's see. He's on. We can hear you through my phone.
My phone muted.
Yeah, you may be muted on Zoom. Well, you're not muted on Zoom, actually. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm seeing my phone. I'm not muted from my phone.
Maybe he needs to put the speaker on the phone or something.
I hear you and I hear them.
Can you guys hear him okay from my phone?
Is that a mic?
I think it's on his phone. Yeah, sure. Let's try that.
Go ahead, Dr. Duffy.
Yes, but what was the question? What is the question, sir?
There is no question right now. Just go ahead and talk about your experience off the bat, and then we get into some of the questions.
Okay, my experience. I came to Fayetteville, I believe, in 1973 as a Catholic military served in Vietnam in infantry, and actually went to visit my brother who was attending the University of Arkansas in the engineering program, and he was staying in the house on campus, and at that time he was the treasurer of PhD, and carry on to stay in the house with him. He was the president of the PhD, and I just heard him telling all the stories about what was going on at the university as it related to Black students, and I can believe that, like students were being assaulted when the games were over at Fayetteville, at the Razorback lost, the real kids and Black students, and they walk around with the rebel flags and number terms and things like that. And I just found it hard to believe that they would tolerate all this aggressive behavior and do nothing about it. And after listening to all those stories, I decided that what I would say I would run for the president of the PhD, show that I could deal with some of the issues that they had told me about.
Now, you had an incident right off to you that happened to you personally while you were here as well, right?
Yeah, I'm saying basically, I parked my car not knowing it at a friend house because there was no place at the dormitory where I was staying. And when I got back to pick up my car, they had broke the antenna, cut the tires, and wrote the N-word on my windshield. And a couple of nights later, I took a couple of brothers, I went to the frat house, I cut their tires, I broke their antennas, and I left them nice messages also. About a week later, going to the dormitory, I remember a bunch of guys in the truck, somebody shot at me. And really, I know the shot, I've been about 6 months out of the military, so I can recognize a gunshot, very easily. And it was just, it was kind of hostility I didn't expect at the university. I wasn't prepared for that type of hostility. Just getting out of the military, which was a very difficult situation, being in Vietnam and coming to the university, where the hostility was so great. I just, which is very difficult to, it was very difficult to survive. And, there's some things later we can talk about, but basically, there were incidents, and there's a couple that I would like to talk to. Maybe the students want to ask about it, but one of the things that really bothered me was Black females were being attacked and nothing was being done about it. One issue, an RA in the dormitory, and it was a all-female dormitory. At 9 o'clock, all the males supposed to leave. And when the Black female approached this white young man, told him to leave us 9 o'clock, he smacked her in the face. At that time, I was the president of DED. I took it to administration to try to get something done about it. They did absolutely nothing. I went to the city of Fayetteville back in assault charge, filed against the individual. They did nothing about it. So what I did, I organized a group of young men, and we knew where this young man ate lunch every day. And it was about 8 of us. When he came in the cafeteria to eat his lunch, we taught him a lesson that he will never forget. And one of the things I tried to do while I was there is make it safe for particularly Black women when you have to be in fear, like coming from the library, getting drunk, things like that. It makes any sense to me. But after that incident, they called the state police and they were reported for my arrest. I remember hiding out in the female dormitory for 3 days trying to figure out what to do. And finally, we reached a compromise with the university. First, they wanted me to come in and all the students that was involved in the incidents in the cafeteria, and it was suspend all of us. And I told them that I couldn't accept that because if they had done their job in the first place, the incident would never happen. But we ended up negotiating, and they decided to drop all the charges on the people involved, and the young man was involved. They suspended him for the rest of the semester. But that was, it was just a small token of gesture that we received. But there were many incidents where students were brutalized, and the university did nothing about it. The other thing I want to say, after the first day I moved to the dormitory, it was late, and I wanted to graduate dorm, but it was already full, so they put me in a regular dorm. My roommate walked in, he saw me. As soon as he saw me, he dropped his bag, went in the hall. Timidly, he came back, never came back to the room. But those were the kind of things that, that you experience as a Black student. And the atmosphere was toxic. I didn't have one Black instructor the whole time I was there. And I remember one class that had one Black student in a class that I attended. All the rest of the classes were all white instructors, all white students. So, it was a difficult situation, but, I came there for a reason and a purpose, and I was not going to let anything that happened there deter me from doing what I came there for. It was to graduate with a master's degree in counseling psychology.
All right. Greg, still with us? Bro, Pitts.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you hear you just fine. It's fine.
Okay. My name is Gregory. I transferred from the University of Dallas in 1980 to the University of Arkansas. I attended as an undergraduate from 1980 to 1983. From 1983 to 1985, I completed my first master's degree. Fortunately, I don't have the personal overt racist experiences that the previous two speakers alluded to. However, I did experience some things both covertly and indirectly, and I also had friends who had some pretty tough challenges as African-American students at the university. I think part of the reason that my experience was a little bit better is because of the people who paved the way for me and people who paved the way for others. So attending the University of Arkansas in 1970 was probably a much different experience from attending in 1980 through 1985. Not to say that it was a panacea, because it wasn't. There were things that I did experience, endure, notice. And I think for the most part, with each passing decade, we should see improvements with respect to race, with respect to equality. That's not always the case, because some of the issues that the current students are dealing with now are some of the same things that I dealt with, or some of the same things that Dinah and Dr. Duffy dealt with as well. So progress is, I guess, relative to an extent. I was the president of STAN, Students Taking a New Dimension, which was the successor of BAD, Black Americans for Democracy. So when I arrived as a student there, the name change had already taken place. And I don't know exactly what the rationale was for changing the name, but I think it had to do with STAN sounded a little bit less radical than BAD. But as the Black student government president, essentially the president of STAN, I did have the opportunity to see the inner workings of the university to an extent. I sat on a lot of different committees and the like. And one thing that I do remember, just to show you how challenging things were and how pervasive things were at the time, was Dr. Linton Clark was the director of the financial aid department. And I remember once he was trying to gather statistics on the number of incoming African-American freshmen. So he requested from the registrar or admitting or wherever, he requested a list of the names of all the incoming freshmen, sophomores, and the like. So it took like a couple of days for him to get the list. Once he got it, the title of the list that was presented to him was List of Newly Admitted Niggers to the University of Arkansas. So I only said that because there were systemically some issues that were very prevalent across the campus. And regardless if I experienced things personally or not, the climate was still challenging, to say the least.
All right, questions for our panel so far? Who wants to ask the first?
And just as a quick technical reminder, if you could, when you ask your question, turn your sound off on your computer, but unmute yourself. That should help us with echo. It's all an experiment though, as we've seen.
No question?
I have a
Okay.
question for Ms. Gant. I'm just curious because you're the first female speaker we've had for this class, and a lot of others have commented on the youth experience or even more challenging experience of Black females on our university campus. Could you talk to them more about how you felt like that intersectionality between your gender and your race caused you to face more discrimination possibly?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that Black people have the luxury of being able to decipher between whether or not it's a racial issue or a sexist issue. And the reason I say that is because systemic racism, at the time that women got their rights, Black people were still left behind. So I never identified with the female problems, I guess, to put it that way. And I'm not, because I was too busy dealing with the other issues, I suppose. And then when I was in engineering school, there were 3 other white females and myself, and I can tell you they were treated differently from me. I was treated differently from them. There were the engineering students always had test files. I mean, they had test files for everything. When they studied together, they always had the test beforehand. They would either get it from the white secretary of the engineering department. So I'm studying to pass the test. They're not studying to pass the test. So again, and that would have been, as I said, there weren't any Black males in the engineering school at the time. There was one guy who came, but he didn't stay. And because again, it was hard for him, and it wasn't hard academically. We came prepared as the other people, but the things that he had to deal with. And my point was, I grew up in a family of 10, coming off a farm in northeastern Arkansas. I have 5 older brothers. My schools were segregated. I never thought that I was inferior to them. I never had the sense that because some people felt that their privileges granted them something. I felt it was a public school. Hey, I deserve to be there. And, if you wanted to give me a C for being colored, there was nothing I could do about it. But in answer to the sexist thing versus the racist thing, I never had the time to worry about the sexist part of it because I was too busy dealing with the other issues. So I guess I didn't answer your question, but that's kind of how, I was dealing with things.
Thank you.
I have one other question should I keep it on Ms. Gant? In engineering, a lot of work also depends on group work. And when that happened, how did you have to deal with that? Did you have a lot of group work, and how was
Uh,
class style?
okay, I can tell you the situation that Dr. Duffy referred to. The gentleman that got his butt whooped was the first person. Um, I had a surveying class, which is you go in teams. The professor sent a list around, and as you sign the list, and I didn't. He said that they would develop the teams. Well, after I signed, the person behind me skipped down 4 spaces. So at the end of the class, the professor looked like he didn't know what to do. And I said, well, you know what? I better not fail this class. Uh, I can't make anybody work with me. And so I never showed up in that class for a couple of weeks. It was the first class of the morning. So they brought me into the dean's office and had 2 young men there. One was Native American, which I never would have known, except for his name. And the other one was the son of one of the professors. So that was a group that I worked with when I had classes with them all the way through engineering school. But the young man who skipped down the 4 spaces was the same young man who felt the need to hit so when he didn't show back up in class after that incident, everybody was going, well, he was in a fight. I said, oh, really? So, but it just so happens that with Mr. Duffy, there was also one of Lonnie's frat brothers who was hiding out at my place during those times. That's the kind of atmosphere that we were having to deal with and still go to school. So, so the group, in reference to the group thing, it was difficult. Most of my projects I did alone.
Thank you.
You can unmute, Terrell. I'll fix it over here.
I know y'all all went to U of A at different times, but how many Black churches were there when y'all were here? Because they couldn't have helped you with everything since they weren't on campus, but they were off campus, and
How many churches, Black churches you asked? 3. St. James Missionary Baptist, which is on Willow Street.
And
St. James United Methodist, which is 1 block away from St. James Missionary Baptist on Willow Street. And then the Church of Christ, which is 5 blocks further south on Willow Street. Those were the 3 Black churches that were out in the community.
And I have a question. What is it what do you mean when you say help us? There were actually more Black people on campus that were in the community. Well, in the 70s.
Just a moment. Trying to connect.
So I guess I'm saying, what do you mean when you say help? I'm sorry, help.
Like, whenever, nah, I can't put my finger on it. Just off-campus stuff in general. The little things that the college students have to, go do. Maybe running errands, maybe staying over someone's house, maybe family driving somewhere else to get stuff like hair products, etc. because it wasn't in Fayetteville. It wasn't in Fayetteville.
My hair was shorter than yours when I was there. I mean, there was
okay.
In fact, I cut hair in my dorm, so.
But you're right, but there also was a barber shop in the old student union, which is you call it now Memorial Hall. That could actually, a barber was in there who could, in the early 70s, who could periodically cut hair. But there was always a movement to get a black barber on the campus. When the student union, as you know it now, opened up in '74, that was one of the things on the agenda was to get a black barber in that space out there. At one point in time, there was a black barber in Union Jack. But as far as supplies and stuff off campus, you're right, there weren't many. Women did a lot of hair, each other's hair in the residence halls. And did a lot of the stuff was done going on. In the small community that was Fayetteville, they call it the Hollow, right over behind East Mountain Street. There was not a certified black beautician over there that I can recall.
But if I understand the intent of the question, you were trying to figure out if there was a connection between the African American community that existed in Fayetteville with the African American student population?
Yes, because I'm from pretty far away, and there aren't a whole lot of students from my high school up here. So when I first got here, well, there weren't a whole lot of students from my high school, black or white, up here. So when I first got here, when I met some of the black churches up here, it was St. James because it's the biggest. It was like a breath of fresh air. So I don't know how often that happened when y'all went to school.
Well, Dr. Duffy will probably remember, we actually ran a tutoring program at one of the black churches. I mean, there was a relationship, but in terms of helping, I'm not, it was a mutual thing. I mean, and I did attend St. James when I was there.
Yeah, one of the things that while I was president of BAD, I saw all of the educated people we had at the black educated people, math, science, English, and the community. So we did establish a tutoring program to try to build some type of liaison between the blacks on the campus of Fayetteville and a connection with the blacks in the community. We also had food drives for Thanksgiving and Christmas, with turkeys and a food basket to those families that was in need in the community. So we did try to establish a relationship between the blacks on campus at Fayetteville and the blacks in the community of Fayetteville. I know, you know what I'm saying? We probably should have done more, but we did attempt to have that relationship and transfer some of the knowledge that we had in terms of some of the smartest people in Arkansas at the university to give some of the same knowledge back to the community so we could help those individuals.
You know, when I came there in the 70s, and it probably was different later on, there was actually different type of blacks. There were blacks from educated families out of Little Rock and Pine Bluff, and there were blacks from the farming community. And there's sometimes a distinction between how they felt they should be there and some people shouldn't. So, but there was a little bit of, and I don't know how to use it other than the fact that it was a cultural difference.
There was a relationship now between the blacks on campus. Not there. Richard Cravens, who was an engineer a few years ahead of Gail, actually married a lady from born and raised here in Fayetteville, who was not a student here. Rufus Thrower, Dr. Rufus Thrower, married a young lady born and raised in Fayetteville, who was not a student here. Dr. Lonnie Williams married a young lady who was born and raised in Fayetteville and was not a student here. So that's a relationship, so to speak. Some of the pretty girls in Fayetteville were out there in Fayetteville community.
And then you all got jumped from the guys out there because you were thinking they're women.
And you want to help me out. Okay, yes. Next question.
How about your story?
How about my story?
As a student and as an employee here?
My story, yes. My story started in 1972 when I arrived as a student, and to stretch to 2003 when I left as a staff member. Fortunate enough, Miss Gant was in the first black sorority. They came here in the spring of '74. I was in the first black fraternity. We came in the fall of '74. Yes, it was played in the marching band. One of only about less than 10 African Americans in the marching band in '72 and '73. Dixie wasn't quite over in '72 when we got here, so stay up in the band and hold your horn while they played whatever. It was a trying time. They talked about young lady being slapped. We made it a practice. Like I said, Reed Hall was all female hall at that point in time, and so most of the black females stayed over in Reed Hall. I think there were less than 5 that actually stayed in Humphreys, which was all female as well. But most of them stayed over in Reed. And so we made a practice, guys were making a practice, like Mr. Duffy said, Dr. Duffy said, to walk young ladies from the library back across campus, especially during Beat Texas Week. Beat Texas was just a time that, I don't know, all of whatever you wanted to be, it just came out. What's the name of that movie where you anything goes for like 24 hours?
Purge.
Purge. Yes, Purge. Beat Texas was like Purge. Only it was just 7 days of it. I mean, especially when we were playing Texas here. I come, it's just that come dark, it just wasn't safe for man, African American, male or female, to be walking across campus because there's just no telling what might come at you from a passing car. I was walking down in front of Fraternity House. I remember most of us when we would go down Dixon Street, we'd be heading down the street. When we get down to the parking lot over here across from lot 71, that was the Capital City House. And we crossed the street, and even on Stadium Drive, you tried to walk on the shoulder versus walking on the sidewalk. So it was crazy. And I think it was about Terry Glenn Lee was president of BAD in 74, 75.
After me, yeah.
Yes, when black students took over the administration building, protesting no cheerleaders, no black cheerleaders and things on campus.
Well, can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, my brother came from New York to go to school when I was a junior, my 3rd year. And he ended up being on the, what do you call it, public safety?
At one time, he was Department of Public Safety.
Public safety. And he was actually there when he became a licensed, they sent him to the whatever academy. But he said that when he would be doing his runs, if you brought your guns to campus, you were supposed to turn them in. They would be taking shots out of their windows at him as he was making this round and calling him all kind of N-words. And so when he got the authority to carry a weapon, I believe he quit shortly after that because he said he was going to shoot somebody. Somebody shooting at you, you're going to shoot somebody. So he only spent 2 years in Fayetteville and left there. After they ended up having to beat up some sheriff's deputy's son for stealing their car. So, but the point is that the N-word and the gunshots, if you had to go out at night, they were there.
And I was teaching Miss Gant about when she came back. Her first student back was in 1998. When we started doing the Black Alumni Reunions in 1990, I created that along with Mike Machesco, who was the director of the Alumni Association. And African Americans, they weren't coming back to campus, not to see their name on the senior wall or for any other reason. At that first reunion, I remember Shirley Williams saying that morning, said, "This is my first time back on campus in 25 years." They said, "I would have been back now if it wasn't for this Black Alumni Reunion." They weren't coming back to that Black Alumni Reunion to support the U of A. They were coming back to be with friends and close relations that they formed while they were here. And those relationships were so tight because that's who you depended on once you walked out of that class. That was your outlet. Gail, when you remember when we ate in Bruck, all the black students they would congregate. One person would go in and get a table, and everybody else would come in and flop. We just have a row of 3 or 4 tables for all African Americans.
If they had dropped the bomb, they could take us all out.
And Sunday evenings, there were no meals on the cafeteria on Sundays, so you do the same thing. So yeah, and so they would come back for the reunion just to be with each other, not to support the U of A, but to be with each other. And it started growing, and it worked. It worked, and that helped to ease some of the hostility that the alumni had for it. And actually, if the university look at it, the university was only getting what it had given all those years. So yeah, it's still this good. 2000, I think somebody asked a question about 2000. Well, in 98, we had the 50th year anniversary. We invited all the black alums that we could get from those that had been here in the 50s to come to campus. We had 3 members who were, y'all said, the 6 pioneers, the first 6 African Americans in law school. Yeah, I think 3 of them, 3 out of the 4 who were still living, came back. And maybe 4 out of 5 who were still living came back. Howard never would come back. He said once he left here, Lord ever let him leave, he never would come back. And by George, he never came back. But most of the long they were here. We had the 3 ladies who were the first to be admitted as undergrads. They came in 1955 as the first black undergrads to this campus. They came back in 1998. I mean, that was a big thing. And then in 2000, we do it every 2 or 3 years. 2000, they had given me at Black Alumni Reunion the Alumni Award and the Lucas Award from the Alumni Association. Surprising, brought my family up without me knowing it. Big deal, big deal. I heard folks at the banquet and stuff. Right after that ended in April, that's when things shifted. We had a new vice chancellor, and she wanted to make changes with her structure. And change was going to be, I had been asking for a full-time director of the multicultural center. I've been serving as interim director along my regular responsibilities since we opened doors in 95. And so she said, well, you're going to be the full-time director. Okay. And I said, all right, well, what about the money? Because she takes some of the other responsibilities away, some of the money was solved by off the grant. Well, so goes the grant, so goes the money. So to me, I was taking, I was getting demoted. Cutting, title was being cut from assistant vice chancellor to the director. I was going to lose money. It was a demotion. Losing officers that going to be reported to, it's a demotion. Well, black alums they didn't like it. They didn't like it. We had 2 who were on the big fundraising board for the university. And one said, we're not going to have it. He quit. He made national news, made a fund for higher education. You know what now is diverse issues in higher education. That time it was called Black Issues in Higher Education, 2 national publications. It made that, so it put a black eye on the university being on the front page of 2 national magazines about how they're treating the minority staff members. Black alumni, so eventually the chancellor gave in. I kept my title. He put the money out there and I kept my money. But that had a lasting effect. It had a chilling effect on the black alums. By that time in 2000, at that event, we'd gone from having less than 100 financial paying members of the Alumni Association to over 800. And it dropped like crazy after that point. And then you had this with no witness. That had put a bitter taste in black alumni. So that would it goes back and forth. But yet still, through those reunions, we were able to generate funding and endowment that's benefited students over $500,000 have gone out in scholarships since that time frame as a derivative of those reunions being created. And that's, you know, it's a lot more detail and stuff. So what's the second question you have? Okay.
Okay, was there any strife getting like black people's names on the senior walk, or was they just? Was there any like turmoil, or was there any issues you had with getting your name on the senior walk?
No, that's universal. They don't know. The people who put their names down there, all they know is this is graduating class and to get children in. So yeah, so that's automatic. Yes.
What got you to get started that?
Last week we had Attorney Dinah kissing me, right? Okay. Well, we formed the Omega Psi Phi fraternity in 1974. 1984, I hosted a 10-year reunion of that organization to come to campus. Well, but I didn't just invite the fraternity members who had come through. We opened it up to Black alumni, friends who we had been close to. Like Gene McKissick, you know, he came up. Several other law students came up, you know. So it was just a big time. It was a mini reunion that was geared off of our 10-year anniversary for the fraternity. And Gene said to me at that time, when I was at that point in time, I was working as the assistant vice chancellor. I was director of minority affairs and multicultural affairs at that point in time. He said, we ought to do this. And he said, this needs to be done for all the black students. And that's what put the thought in my mind to get it done. So from 84 to 89, you know, we just something in the back of my mind. Kind of like that book that we did, like this in the back of my mind. So you came forward and said, what you want to do? Yeah. And then so I made it happen. And, talked to the director of the Alumni Association, Michael Shesco. He said, yeah, but it's a few years away. Well, I thought we could do it. And so we went on and made it happen. We just grew from there. Yes.
Was there any specific reason you chose to do Omega Psi Phi first?
The reason was prior to us forming Omega Psi Phi, we had formed a little club. It was about 13 African American males, and we called it the Brotherhood. And so one night we were sitting up, and Don asked me, we want to bring fraternity to campus. What fraternity we want to bring? So we sat there in that room and we said, who's had the most influence on it? And so as we talked individually and collectively about it, come to find out people of being of Omega had the most influence upon us. So that's the fraternity we sought out.
I'm probably gonna catch some for this, but I asked that because like there's a stigma of Omega Psi Phi being like a nickname as Q Dogs.
Okay.
Would you have had any sort of run-in with the connotation of that at the university? Or do I have the wrong friend?
No. You don't so much about that. Yeah. We had a faculty, all student organizations that have a faculty or staff advisor. We had the first African-American faculty member as our advisor, Dr. Gordon Morgan. So, no, the university wasn't concerned about the Q-Dog image at that point in time. Yes.
Being some of the charter members of the first Black sorority and Black fraternity on campus, did you face any backlash from students or faculty on campus for wanting to start that? Or I guess, yeah, did you face any backlash? I mean, it obviously isn't an easy process, but just kind of talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, you want to get to that?
Yes, actually, the students on campus didn't have anything to say about it. So, I mean, that comes out. We have a national organization out of Washington, D.C., and you actually have to petition to get a chapter anyway. What the requirements actually for Black sororities in particular were really more stringent than those of the sororities that were already on campus. We didn't have a house, at the time. It wasn't about, in fact, the Deltas are a public service organization. It's not, and I was a member of the, is it Panhellenic? What is it?
Panhellenic, yeah.
It's all, so I was actually had to represent our sorority at those, because I got to deal with all of them. In a lot of cases, our aims and goals are quite different. So we weren't a threat to them and they weren't a threat to us.
Now, as we were forming those groups during that time frame, no. But if Lord Myers was on, he would tell you that part of the reason he wanted to run for president of BAD and change the name to Stand was that he saw, and later on some folks would say it, that they saw where there was a fragmentation beginning between the Black Greeks and the Black students. And so that was, he wanted to try to bring some unity about doing that. But basically, the Black Greeks were the ones who provide most of the entertainment. We threw parties in the basement of, because we didn't have a building, in the basement of Yoakum Hall, Gregson Hall, wherever resident hall we could get at one time, a full bright cafeteria. That's where we rent those spaces. That's where we did our party. And that was what being done pretty much by the Black Greek organizations. And even when we moved to the student union. So the entertainment was being provided by that segment. And actually, you know, and they were actually starting to run the office. Like, Gail, were your presidency before you became president of BAD?
Yes.
Yes. So, you know, the Black Greeks also became leaders of the organization. Greg was a member of Mega Sci Phi, you know, president of STAN. So, you know, you have different opinions about the Black Greeks. Yes.
I was reading your interview, and you know, you said in that you were mentored by Dr. Dean Marquez. How did that come to happen? How did you form a relationship of mentoring with Dr.
Did I use the word mentor?
Yeah.
I did? You sure? Okay. Okay. Gene is a year or two older than I am. All right. When I got to campus, my roommate, who was in my high school class that we'd gone through school together from grade 1 through 12, we came up here together. So we were roommates my freshman year. We were the only two African Americans on my floor in Yoakum Hall. Matter of fact, out of the 10 floors in Yoakum, my first year there were less than 10 African Americans in that building. Gene was one of the ones who was in the building. Marcellus Nelson was also in the building. And Marcellus was became an RA my second year there. And then Raymond Bogart was also in there. So the upperclassmen were the ones we went to. You know, like I said, that idea of everybody eating together and at the table, yes, they were the ones. We used to use their equipment for the dances and everything. So we had a very close relationship being in that residence hall, being the only ones in that residence hall. So yes, so now I would, you know, close friends from that point on, and then from the reunions, he's been with me through the reunions and everything else. Yeah, so if I use the word mentoring, I'm surprised, but yes, it's been like a older brother who's been looking out. That's what they did. Him, Marcellus Nelson, Raymond Bogart, and there were others across the campus as well. Everybody took, the older ones took the younger ones under their wings. Now I remember when when I first came up for orientation, there was a Black orientation week, and Ursuline Blanks. She was the orientation leader. When we got through with our regular orientation session, she took me from Pomfret Hall over to Store Street, and I forgot why we were. She had an apartment over on Store Street. And the few blacks that came up in orientation, that day, we had a different session at that point in time. So it was, we call it mentoring, we can call it big brother, little brother, big sister, whatever. It was going on during that time frame. Everybody was trying to look out for each other. Next question.
I'm from Magnolia, Arkansas.
And where am I from?
Pine Bluff, right? No, you from State.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Our hometown's 17 miles apart.
Right.
All right.
I forgot about
Go
that.
ahead with your question.
Mrs. Gant mentioned only coming back in 1998 for Jennifer Hopkins Day. Who was Jennifer Hopkins?
You want to tell me who Jennifer Hopkins was? Outside being one of the prettiest ladies on campus?
Well, Jennifer actually was the first. No, she was a journalism graduate from the University of Arkansas. She just so happened to have been one of my best friends. And I remember this was a girl who would take 24 credits and she would dare the instructor to give her a C for being colored. I mean, because she would just, I mean, she would ace the classes. Um, the reason it was Jennifer Hopkins Day primarily is because that she was such a prominent person on campus, and she died early in life. She was the first Black reporter that the Arkansas Democrat Gazette had there in Little Rock. And remember when she took the job, she told them they could send her anywhere but to a Klan rally. So she was from Park in Arkansas. She came out of the cotton fields of Northeast Arkansas as well. But and I don't know. I believe that Nola must have had a special relationship with her. I'm not sure because, as I said, I left the state of Arkansas in 1978. So
Yeah, she and Nola did have a special relationship, and as part of that Friday, we were try to help draw the alumni, Black alumni back. That Friday of that weekend, Nola created a career fair with the idea, let's put the Black alums into the classroom. So folks can see them. So we made a career fair. And so she named the career fair in honor of Jim. Thank you. All right, there were more questions.
I know, I was gonna say. Got like several pages of questions for y'all.
you know, I want to say someone had a question about discrimination and harassment in engineering school. And as I said, those weren't even words back then. That those weren't the buzzwords back then and 50 years ago. Quite frankly, it was just rude, systemic rudeness, and white privilege. So I could not, because I looked at that question and I thought, well, I went to check out the definition of discrimination. I went to check out the definition of harassment. And recently, I've been reading a book by Isabel Wilkerson titled Caste. And the reason people chose to mistreat people who were a different color, it was purely economics. And it didn't start, 50 years ago. And that appears to be the case now. Economics is driving systemic racism and did so in 1619. So, and I get so, it's almost overwhelming now to be talking about the same things we were talking about 50 years ago. I have one daughter who's a civil engineer. Guarantee she goes through the same mess I did 50 years ago. So until people realize that this is so ingrained in this country, weren't even Black people until they had to decide that they had to make a distinction between people so they could enslave them. There was no reason. Otherwise, you were Irish, you were Polish, you were, but at any rate, I don't want to get off on that, but I just wanted to say that when we talk about things and people who are in classes now with unlearning racism, the history is out there. We need to do some reading on our own, and then you will see why white privilege, which has driven people to mistreat people, is so ingrained for so many reasons. And Orval Faber said it. No, it was who was the other racist governor? No, it was Orval Faber. What he said was his daddy told him when he was coming up, because he was poor as Joe's turkey, as they say, but he could always hang his hat on the fact that there was somewhere else that was always beneath him, and that was people who looked like me. So that's how he got his self-esteem.
I mean, it wasn't all dead and gloom. But like I told you, there was only two of us on my floor. It was all. But during that time, when we had a pet rally, it wasn't just a fraternity sorority doing skits. Your floor could do a skit at the pet rally. Two blacks on my floor, all the white guys on my floor. I was involved. They pulled me out of my room and made me a part of this skit that we would do during those pet rallies. And one of the RAs who was in the open, he was getting beat playing chess. He needed somebody to beat. So he taught me how to play chess. And that lasted until I learned. And I started beating like everybody else was doing. But we're still close to the day. People I served with in the band, you know, most of them, hey, great folks. Some of them I'm still close to today. I mean, I'm talking about the white folks, still close today. You have friends in pockets. I started out in engineering. I still did. Took a course called graphics. Every student had to take graphics. White guy on my student on my floor, no, one floor above me, you know, getting A's in his section graphics. I'm flunking myself. He helps me, he tutors me in graphics. I still get the F in the board. So there were some bright spots in there. It wasn't like dodging all the time. There was some, you know, there was coalition, there was some friendships made. But other times, you know, it's always small that minority group that you gotta look out for. Yeah, our feet, we used to go over feet. Now, which is now the hotel on campus, we had the church house. Oh, doing homecoming, oh, they known that with the top black band across country, Light Track, the function, had them out there playing. Go jam. They had them all. It was amazing how the races had the black band, you know.
And Lonnie, I wanted to say something. I had 14 credits past what I needed to graduate because I took sociology and African American studies classes under Adolph Reed and Dr. Morgan. That was how I maintained my sanity, by being there. And Adolph Reed, I learned so much from his class, and he used to make the people who weren't of color in his class just cringe. But and Dr. Cooksey was also one. So I had some mentors besides O.C. Duffy and Ed Bailey and Melvin Jones. They actually got me through school.
Duffy, you got anything you like to add as time starts to grow close?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say, I was reading one of the questions had to do with that you feel that you helped the college make some type of transition while you were there. I know when I was there, so they were attacking black students physically, and one of the things that I said that I would do as president of BAD, I would stop it. And when I left, I'm saying I didn't hear of any other black female in particular being assaulted by white students, and I hope that I was able to help the university, you know, see the light in terms of treating everybody with dignity and respect, particularly women, and that in some way change the hostility, the overt hostilities towards black students on the campus. And you know, it just made it made it extremely difficult to be successful with those activities going on and you trying to pursue your education. So I hope while I was there, I helped change those two events so that Black students would have an easier time trying to matriculate at the university.
Greg, got something you'd like to say?
Greg, you're muted.
Sorry. First and foremost, I'd like to say I was honored to be included in this forum, but I would like to leave with something that's somewhat provocative, and it's not to make people feel down or anything, but America still has to come to terms with a lot of things that we have done that have had a negative impact across the world. In the 1880s, there was a program that was started called eugenics, and it was basically a program that was designed to weed out imperfections, people with mental illness or mental infirmities, what have you. That program was duplicated and taken over by the Nazis in the 1930s and throughout the 1940s. They based those actions on what we did in America. Also, to disenfranchise the Jewish people in Germany, they sent lawyers to the United States to study Jim Crow. What they did to the Jewish population in Germany wasn't a German idea. That was an idea that originated in America based on Jim Crow laws. In fact, there was a German exchange student who attended the University of Arkansas. His name was Heinrich Krieger. He attended in the 1930s, and his writings based on Jim Crow laws basically led to the final solution. So the young people who are listening tonight, hopefully you have found some of this enlightening. You have a larger part to play in life. We will depend on you at some point. So the legacy that lies ahead of you is extremely important. Take this as a lesson in life and hopefully become a better person as a result of the things that you have experienced during your stay at the University of Arkansas. Thank you.
One of the questions y'all had on that meeting, someone asked about how to go ask when I gave the Dr. Martin Luther King Award to two white males. Oh, yeah.
In the reading, it talks about that. I just wanted you to talk about the backlash you got from that. Apparently there's a word for it, blacklash. But I'm not sure if that really catches it. Because I looked up the definition, it's not quite right.
We had members of our called for nominations for the awards. We had not received any nomination for the award. At that point in time, we were having problems with the football players. You know, I spoke earlier about the Greeks and being separated from the Greeks and regular students. Well, then there was a third faction, athletes, primarily the football players. Football players were coming to the parties, busting up the parties, wanting to fight. So I called a meeting with had leaders from the black organizations, Black Greeks, Nolan Richardson, and Coach Crow. Had them there. And Coach Crow said, tell me what's going on. Tell me what you need to do with my players, and we'll get it done. He said, it's selfish. He said, the last thing I need is to have somebody going out here saying black students can't get along on campus. He said, that's gonna hurt my recruitment. He said, it's selfish on my part. If you just tell me what you need to get done, need me to do, and we'll make it happen. And from that conversation, we didn't have any more problems with football players. We had no more. He took over. So I nominated him. Dan Farrell was the chancellor. The idea for the Multicultural Center came from Dan Farrell. You know, you think it came from black faculty staff, because of black students, but it actually came from Dan Ferry. Dan went out and was doing a program at Ole Miss in Mississippi State. They were offering free tuition to African Americans to go to grad school. So he brought that idea back. In another school he gone to, he had seen a Black Culture Center. And so he said, we need that on this campus. So he came back and he said, I want a Black Culture Center on this campus. And I later changed it to Black Culture Center because we had already started working with Native American students and having the power hours. And I said, well, if we do this Black Culture Center, then you have to come back in and come up with a space for a Native American Center, then a Latino Center. And we don't have that right now. You don't even have funding to get it corrected. So let's start off with a multicultural center. So that's where the concept came from. The idea came from Dan. And he was supportive of everything that we're doing. So gave them the award. And when those names were read off that night, oh yeah, you definitely could have heard a pin drop in that room. You definitely could. And folks turned around and looked at me. And the next day I told them, damn right I did it. He said, yeah. And I bet you that the next year they'd have a problem getting nominations. But I stood by those awards. All right. I think that's about our time unless somebody's got another question. We're here for you right now. So I gotta run out of here. That's on y'all. So no other questions or comments? Dr. Robinson, Ms. Powell, thank you so much. My panelists, thank you so much for taking out your time to come out and do this. I appreciate it. Good
Thank
to
you.
see
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
Thank y'all.
Sorry.
Greg.
What's up, Dinah?